Sorry, we were a minute late.
That's all right. The Oneida and Tuscarora, they thought of the Americans as their neighbors, and they fought on the American side. Cayugas and Onondagas were a mixed bag, so it was each warrior's decision, but each of those nations did participate in one or another of the two main events that caused residents of the American frontier to beg George Washington to do something about it. These were the Cherry Valley Massacre and the Wyoming Massacre. So, this what to do began to take hold when New York State did have its control of its lands. And part of that you see in the white areas on this map, the reservations. Notice the Oneida Reservation is very large compared to Onondaga and Cayuga. What you're looking at, though, on this map on the left that looks like a darker gray area, this was a solution to New York's other problem. And that was what to do for the veterans of the war, the patriots who had not been paid. Remember that when they said our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor on July 4th of 1776, they did not know what would transpire over the next 7 years. It was a long war. Many of the early settlers had lost large numbers of family members. Those who came from Connecticut lost about a dozen. Those who came from Pennsylvania, they all had losses. And their businesses also were completely destroyed in many cases. So a lot of people wanted to make a fresh start. And this land was divided into lots. So what you see as a cross-hatching is actually individual lots in the then very large Onondaga County. Aurora, which was then called Scipio, is it's a little bit to the left of the middle, but it was already coming to be a place by some early jump-the-gun settlement of a group of veterans from Pennsylvania who had hoped to lease land for farms from the Cayuga. And they made that lease not knowing that at that very month in Albany, it was being decided that there could be no private leases anymore. So Aurora was well situated in terms of access to become the county seat, and it was. And I sometimes joke, I think Aurora has never gotten over being the county seat for the time it was. But as such, it needed a land agent, it needed a county clerk, and it needed lots and lots of lawyers. For veterans to avail themselves of a lot, these were partitioned by lottery. Some didn't wish to move and wanted to sell their share. Others wished to buy. Some unscrupulous middlemen would sell the same piece of property 2 or 3 times in a day to different people. So there was a great need for lawyers, both to do the basic work of establishing ownership, but also preventing these kinds of difficulties. The land agent was the same man as the clerk, Benjamin Ledyard, for whom our town is named. He was himself a veteran. He had served in a number of significant battles near New York and spent the winter in Valley Forge, where he got to be good friends with Aaron Burr, who probably assisted in suggesting him as land agent. So in about 1793 and 4, he made a couple of visits to scope things out and came with his family in 1795. A large family, wife and several children, and a number of enslaved and their children. Early in his time, He did a beautiful hand-drawn map, February 1795, and it was the first time that this village was designated as Aurora. It is thought that he himself came up with the name rather than a Roman general, a Roman and Greek goddess of the dawn. So on this map, which I hope is still well cared for in the Wells College archives, but I have no idea. Let's take a closer look. On the left-hand side, that's the north, you see the Cayuga Reservation, and the nearest road, it's called Poplar Ridge, but it's not the one we call Poplar Ridge. It's the one we call Sherwood Road. On the right-hand side, just a little to the right of the line that, by the way, runs through the word Aurora, if you can read it, there are 3 buildings. The first one is still standing for sure. That's Patrick Tavern. Then there are 2 smaller buildings sketched. And we know from the location, the original location of the house we call the Paul Jones house was not where it is now. It was moved from that lot, the second building from Patrick Tavern. And you might be able to read very pale lettering, Lawyer Mumford Office. And that was described as a frame structure containing an office. So who was Mumford? Well, he was an example of the kind of person who came to Aurora to practice his profession. He was born in Connecticut, came to Aurora 1795, and he served as surrogate of Onondaga County from 1797 to 1799. That, by the way, is when Cayuga County was split off from Onondaga. He was a charter trustee of Cayuga Academy. He moved to Auburn after 1807 and became first president of its bank. Now, with the formation of Seneca County from Cayuga County, Aurora was no longer centrally located. There was a very hot competition for the new county seat. Even such players as Lavanna and Sherwood were interested. Sherwood almost got it. The winning one was Hardenberg's Corners, and Mr. Hardenberg strenuously objected to the renaming, but it was nonetheless renamed Auburn. That was designated the county seat in 1804, but the county functions didn't move until 1807 because they had to build some buildings. So after 1807, you do see a pronounced change in the composition of the village. The professional men, the lawyers, there were about 8 associated with the legal profession, and over half of them left. So let me take a quick pause here and see if there are questions.
So there is one in the chat that says, I know this is from Karen Wyckoff. I know there was a son of Benjamin Franklin, or perhaps a grandson, who was a land speculator involved in taking up native lands in the Cooperstown area. Was he also speculating as far west as Aurora?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. William Franklin, that was the grandson, and he seems to have spent a lot of his career overseas in London and Paris. So I don't know the answer to that. I have not read that name in connection here because the Franklin or Franklin's family that we have was Roswell Franklin's family, and they were the early arrivals, hoping to set up leases with the Cayuga. Okay. A second map, 10 years later, Aurora in 1805, and that same lot is now a silversmith shop. The legend has it the letter L, and that's a little building by the road. It's a bit hard to see. This map is in private hands and well cared for, but not the easiest to photograph. The map was by surveyor Humphrey Howland, and he actually drew the buildings. So this raises an interesting question. Which building is the center part of Paul Jones' house? The 1795 map shows the building from the street, and it's just a very simple little building with a central chimney. The 1805 map has two buildings on that lot, and one of them is a salt box. That's the one in the upper center. And there's another one right next to the street, the road, Main Street, then called Milton. And that's a plain gable structure. Both of these are going to look pretty much the same when you're facing them. So let's get into the building a little bit. The house as we know it, and these pictures were taken today so that you could feel like you're here. The salt box shape is very characteristic of New England, and that's the main part of the house. You can see a steeper slope on the front and a longer slope on the back. The central chimney belongs to the early era of Aurora houses. And on the lower photograph, you can see the chimney in the center, plus the chimney at the back. That's something I might mention as we go on. So all of this so far is very consistent with a very early house built by New Englanders. There are some other forms of houses in Aurora. So how it was built. It's timber framed. The beams would be hand hewn, and they're connected without any nails or brackets or anything like that. Mortise, a slot in a beam, a tenon that goes into it, pegged together with tree nails, abbreviated trunnels. Here's some exposed framing in Patrick Tavern, 1793, just a few doors away from the original location. So that's how buildings were built. Now let's go inside Paul Jones. At the entrance to the attic, there's very clearly a hand-hewn beam. In the basement are one or two puncheons, which are logs with the bark still on. And up in the attic, the center picture, and then that's the right-hand truss is expanded. That's called a half-lap truss, and that was a very common way of building a roof if you weren't going to use a ridge beam. So something interesting about this is that timber framing gives a building stability from the weight of the members. You can have 10 by 10s, 12 by 12s, long pieces. This is from virgin timber, and thick, wide floorboards. Modern construction gets its stability from the number of members. You're not seeing an original roof interior. The roof decking was replaced about 9 years ago. So, but this is a type of construction also very characteristic for a very early date. I can pause here because that's a bit technical. So, are there any questions?
There was one question. The gravestone of Mumford, where is that?
That is in Cayuga, just a couple villages to the north. There are Mumfords all over, and I initially thought he might be with the branch of the Mumford family for whom Mumford, New York is named. But it seemed that every generation felt obliged to have several Thomases if possible. So it was a little hard to sort them out, but our Thomas Mumford is buried in Cayuga.
I have a question.
Yes, Cindy.
It's in terms of modern day Aurora that I would be able to place.
Mhm,
Where, from the map that you showed us earlier,
mhm,
where
mhm.
was the Paul Jones house in relation to Patrick Tavern, for instance?
We'll come to it. It was the site
Okay,
on which Gene Davis's house was built.
say
Gene
that
Davis'
again?
house. Gene Davis's house.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so now we're moving ahead um, to Aurora becoming more of a community. The Presbyterian Church was built in 1819. These are the years of the lead up to the Erie Canal. There was already a lot of lake traffic. There were already markets for local products, fruit, wool, pork. Early church life had a visiting pastor who had an office, which is on the 1805 map, meetings probably in private homes. The 1819 building was designed by Jacobs Hovey, the same architect who designed the Masonic Lodge. In 1831, the church got a new pastor, um, Henry Roberts Hoisington, born in 1801 in Vermont. His family moved to Buffalo. His father was a militia officer and was killed in the War of 1812. He was one of seven children then, raised by his mother, a charter member of the First Presbyterian Church of Buffalo. Henry became a printer, traveled to Utica and New York City, was caught in the typhus epidemic in New York City, and there his earlier conversion led him to promise to preach. He went to Williams College in Massachusetts, which was a hotbed of mission fervor, um, even into that time, and then came to Auburn Seminary. He was ordained in Aurora, in the church you just saw, in August of 1831, and married Nancy the next month. So this house was their first home. There seems to have been a very deep connection with the congregation. In 1833, the Hoisingtons sailed for India, for Ceylon. This old house was occupied by Henry R. Hoisington, one of the early pastors of the Presbyterian Church. He, with his wife Nancy L., were sent to Ceylon as missionaries. Many tokens of love were carried with them from the members of the church. This photograph, which I would call probably around 1850, might have been on their return to the States, and you can see the rigors of their work. They spent almost 20 years service in India. In 1834, the first missionaries at Madura. He established 2 schools, taught at the seminary in Batakata. He became fluent in Tamil, the local language, became a translator, and translated a book on Hindu astronomy, um, as well as a couple of others. He worked still in printing as needed, and the many schools, including medical training, made this a highly educated part of India. They had 6 children. 1 son and 3 daughters survived. 1 son died in India, and 1 on the return journey in 1849. He then went on to pastorates in Williamstown, where he had gone to college, and Connecticut, where Henry died. And there might be some church musicians here, I'm not sure, but some of you will remember the old hymn from Greenland's Icy Mountains, which was a new hymn at that time. And I know it would have been sung in Aurora, probably often. And when it was, those who remembered the Hoisingtons, when they heard India's coral strand and the spicy breezes blow soft o'er Ceylon's isle, they could put real faces and memories to that. We have a few letters in the village archives written by Nancy back to Aurora. The first one starts on shipboard on the ship the Israel. And they're very brittle, very faded, and hard to read. But this is something that I would like to read more of. The ship journey is about as bad as you would expect. That much I can say. So they had a short stay in Aurora, but left a long memory. Are there any questions?
Yes,
With
Linda.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Somebody, first of all, Linda Gallagher just wants to remark about fond memories of the house.
Hmm.
And Helen McLallen, who is local, would like to
Mhm.
know if you know where Nancy Lyman's family was from. Helen, maybe do you know connections to the Lyman family?
I have some collateral Lyman relatives that were from Connecticut.
Um,
So just curious.
Okay. Nancy herself was from Chester, Massachusetts. The pastorate, which was Henry's last, was in Centerport, Connecticut. I don't, but those names are probably enough to give you. There is somebody online who has done, yes, if you look up Henry R. and Nancy Lyman Hoisington, there is someone who has done genealogical work on both of them. And it was an open thing. So I was able to find that. And so you can find it too. And I hope that will help.
Yeah, I was just curious because like a third cousin of mine who's descended from that line has let me borrow some family letters where that branch of the family was in Indiana and they were writing back and forth in the 1830s and 40s
Oh,
to
wow,
the
interesting.
family in Connecticut.
Yes.
And also sending some of their kids there to stay with the grandparents and get educated.
Yeah. Linda, we have
Okay.
another question.
Yes.
They want to know if the Presbyterian Church owned the house and that is why the Hoisingtons were going to be living there.
That I'm not sure. I'd have to check deeds. The next inhabitant was also a pastor, Chauncey Cook. And 2 or 3 residents on was Lewis Himrod, who was a deacon of troubled history. The late Judy Furness and I used to laugh about it, that he was booted for a little while for drinking and then taken back again. But he fulfilled a number of different roles in Aurora, most of them not church. So I don't think the Presbyterian Church ever owned it. If so, it was briefly.
And who is this that someone mentioned that they think that the Centerport is not in Connecticut, but rather Centerport, New York, right across Long Island Sound from Connecticut.
Oh, okay. It was listed as he died in Connecticut. So thank you. And I'll check whether there could have been an earlier community on the Connecticut side of the Sound.
Possible.
Yeah.
Towns moved from time to time.
Yes. So I mentioned the Erie Canal, and of course, by its formal opening, that commenced a great era of building for Aurora, increased again by the Civil War. A lot of immigrants from Ireland, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, freedom seekers joined descendants of the early enslaved. So there began to be neighborhoods associated particularly with working people. And then, of course, the building of Wells College, the need for builders, for housekeepers, for groundsmen, for mechanics. So here are a couple of maps, and I pointed out the location of the house. In 1875, There's some houses in between. For Cindy's question, the big house next to Patrick Tavern, that was Salem Town's house, and it burned in. He was the head of Cayuga Academy for many years and highly respected. That burned in about 1904. So that isn't there, and that's where the Maloney house is. And I think the one next to it may also be on that property. So, but there's again the little L-shaped house, and in 1904 you see it again. That's associated with the name M. Whitaker. And you'll notice its location is conveniently across the street from the station. There was the railroad had been built in 1875, but the station then was behind the inn and the Morgan store. You'll notice also that at the bottom of the little excerpt of the map, there's a professor listed, and that would be in the Jedediah Morgan house. So, immigration brought new families, as I've described, and in the census of 1910, Thomas Stack and his family occupied the house. He was the section foreman of the railroad. Both he and his wife were born in Ireland, and he and his wife had at that point 5 children aged 12 and under, in a very neat progression of age 12, age 10, age 8, age 6, age 4. We might even guess there could have been one on the way. And that immediately suggested to me, boy, do you think they needed a bigger house? Just imagine the central part of the Paul Jones house for a family that size. So let's look at it. The maps you've seen, 1805, 1875, and 1904, all show an L-shaped house. It was very common to have an L on the back of a house for the summer kitchen. And the carefully reconstructed stone fireplace might be a remnant of that, possibly, that was chosen to be saved. Sometimes you'd have a room or two in that back area next to the kitchen. So I wondered, were the wings on either side of the house added sometime around 1910? So then I did my other favorite thing of going in the basement and looking at the foundation under the framing under the south wing. And there's a new board running horizontally. And above that looked to me like full dimension lumber. That started to be used in Aurora's construction in the 1880s, generally, and for many years into the 20s, even in some places. So for those who don't know about full dimension lumber, that's a 2x4 that's actually 2x4, as opposed to the 2x4 of today, which isn't. Meanwhile, at Wells, the college was small then, around the turn of the last century. The faculty was small. So it was a tight-knit group within a tight-knit village. You could know everyone. And one who came into the community in 1897 was Anne Reese Pugh. She was born in 1865, so she was already a well-established scholar. And you see some of her credentials here. Distinguished scholar, excellent teacher, remembered very fondly by her students. There were some amusing stories of her apparent vagueness, which I tend to think wasn't, because if you read about how she was as a director of plays, or when she encountered a class which had not done the required preparation for the day's discussion, how she would sweep out This was the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove from time to time. So let's look a little bit at faculty life in that era. You see Anne in the lower left of this page from the Cardinal. I think it's 1918. Married faculty, and that would mean male, might rent a college house or buy one. And you saw a few minutes ago Professor E. Winkler. He's on the upper right of this page. And next to Anne Reese Pugh is Walter Irenaeus Lowe. He lived actually in the house that Benjamin Ledyard had built. And I don't recall whether he bought it. I think he did. Some faculty would live for a time in a boarding house. The Fleissners did. Single women faculty had it a lot tougher, and there were a lot of them. Jean Davis wrote feelingly about that when she came in the 20s. They were typically assigned apartments or rooms in college-owned houses like the C.B. Morgan House or Mandel House. Miss Pugh was the faculty resident in Glen Park. So if you remember the layout of Glen Park, she lived in what was sometimes the RA's apartment or room on the right as you enter in the main entrance. So now we come to how the house was saved. And this that I'm going to read from is from an essay by Mary Elizabeth Bohannon, her colleague, and also a Wells graduate. And some of you might have read some of this. As she approached retirement, Miss Pugh had always intended to have a house of her own in Aurora, loving the village and its surroundings as she did. In 1925, the late Robert Zabriskie was about to build the dark green bungalow, now, writing in 1950, Miss Davis's house, and to do so needed to demolish the somewhat dilapidated little house on his lot. Miss Pugh asked if she might buy it and was told she could have it, provided she moved it away. So she purchased the lot adjacent to the church, this would be St. Paul's Episcopal Church, from Miss Morgan, Miss Edith Morgan, E.B. Morgan's granddaughter, and went to work on her plans. Like an engineer, she figured out exactly how the house could be disjointed and moved in 3 pieces not too large to allow for their conveyance up the little slope between the lilac bushes and the smoke bush, which she already loved as her own. When the movers found it impossible to carry out their contract and sent her word that they could not without destroying the shrubbery, don't destroy the shrubbery, get the largest piece in place, she came in person from the college and directed them. The 3 little box-like sections remained for a time piled up. But Miss Pugh had decided that by the following June, the house would be reassembled and restored. So she turned architect and designer. Her plans are extant, it says. I hope they're in the Wells archives. And then supervised the carpenters and mason and plumber until the work was finished. So she must have had a very good idea of the things that I showed you about how the house was constructed, or she learned in process. The houses completed must, like Miss Pugh herself, have been seen to be believed. And like Miss Pugh, it combines the unexpected with the best of its original proportion and dignity. Ingenious utilization of space and careful reconstruction with old lumber give it a spirit of timelessness and of endearing, gracious warmth. Painstakingly and faultlessly, she placed her lovely antiques within the house, her copper and pewter and silver, and her library of books. Then she turned to the garden and embarked on its plan with the same precision and sense of design with which she had blueprinted the house. The result was a garden which perfectly conformed to the gentle slope upwards behind the house, an English garden whose finest moments were in the spring. To complete the garden, she added a tiny brick veranda, which she liked to call her patio, to which she could step from the doors of the house for tea. Flag walks were added, half hidden in the grass, converging on one more of the many doors which were open ever to her friends. Here Miss Pugh lived for 10 years with her red setter Sheila, until illness necessitated her leaving this part of the country. She later set down in verse, in a volume entitled Born on the Wind, memories of the cottage, which she styled Three Wings, of the garden, of the birds, and of the peace which she found there. And in one of those poems, she would deny what I have claimed, that the house personifies her, for she says she tried to paint its walls, but was finally forced to leave it alone. The house is now owned by Pauline Jones, an alumna of the college, who knew Miss Pugh very well. And now I would like to give Miss Pugh the last word on this. As you see, the interior she knew so well. This is from Born on the Wind. The cottage. There is a cottage with a low open door, looking to the glamour of the wide, distant shore. A rose vine is blooming along its modest eaves. White blooms are hiding under lilac leaves. A catbird on the ridge, but a little higher, to the quiet of the star above the silent lake, is singing the delirium of his heart's desire. There's a robin singing in his wake. And the wreathing smoke of the sweet wood fire fills a little garden close behind. The winding grassy walks are hard to find, but you are guided by the fragrant ranks of bloom. All about the cottage, there's but little room, but it still has a quiet, friendly glow. Though the human mysteries it can hardly know, it knows not the secrets of newborn life and breath, nor yet the solemn wonder of somber, silent death. It feels the unguessed things it cannot know. It guesses wondrous things it cannot show. All about it, flowers smile and sleeping nod. Still, they are happy in their quiet dreaming. So the little cottage has a blissful seeming of being close to silent happiness, a happiness that can both soothe and bless, and of being ever very near to God. Of her companion, to an Irish setter. Is there a place where furry feet may find their rest? Is there a space where padded paws can cease their quest? Your fleeting, hurrying feet would surely leaven some of the heaviness of artificial heaven and give it added zest. Would heaven be heaven without you, Sheila? What would the white robe to do about you, Sheila? I think it's not the place you seek. You so humble, happy, lowly, meek. A heaven would be most absurd if there were no room to chase a bird. And finally, houses. You have seen that houses have their own life? Inanimate things have a will of their own. I painted my house. It was a matter of strife. I was finally forced to leave it alone. A house has its way of keeping or giving, which finally lends it a certain air. It shows so plainly its manner of living, which its owners inevitably share. I hope you've seen that houses do have their own life, and I thank you. I think we have about 15 minutes left, so we can engage in discussion.
Thank you, Linda. This is wonderful. I wanted to
Yes.
ask if you knew anything about the mechanics of how the house was carried, because I'm not remembering the exact year that Main Street got paved. So I'm not sure if it was paved the year that the house was moved or not. And part of me was wondering, well, would it have been easier to wait for it for winter and to sort of drag it on the ice, or just how it got done?
Okay, that depended a little bit, as you are suggesting, on what was available at the time. Our newest show has a postcard from about 1910 showing road work and one of those old steam tractors rolling out Main Street. So I think paving was good enough then.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure by truck. Probably if there were some older guys, they remembered how it had been done in earlier times, which was to use a sweep turned by a horse.
Mhm.
And that would draw the building along, usually on log rollers. You couldn't always count on having ice, and ice would have its own difficulties. So they could have hooked it up as they had seen done many times. And Tom Gunderson has some stories from his father, I think, about seeing that being done with some buildings. So when you have a timber frame building with good sill plates that are 12 by 12s, and not pieced at all, you can pull something off like that. Yes. So the wings would be taken off and each piece moved separately.
Okay, there's a question here about how Paul Jones came to live in it. And that's from Shirley. Shirley, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Paul Jones and her role in the house next month. But I'll just briefly say that Paul Jones was class of 1918, and became something of an Uber alum. She served as president of the Alumni Association twice. She worked for the college as alumni secretary. She served on the board of trustees. And I think she got so tired of having to come back and forth between her home in Ohio and Aurora that she just said, I got to get me a place here. Well, we'll talk more about that in October, which we're scheduled for October 8th. So tune in.
Yes, I will leave that to you. I knew that you had that well under control.
Are there other questions or comments? Okay, let's see here, Karen. Who are we? I'm looking, I've got to pull down this person's first name or last name here. Who is that? KL? Thanks. It says, what an amazing and comprehensive presentation. And I agree. Thank you so much.
Linda,
Yes.
do you know what contents, original or donated, are still in the house, or is it empty?
Since this is not yet formally social media, the interior views that you saw were from June of this year. So
Okay,
that's what's in there now. Or yeah, haven't seen anything moved out. I would probably notice it if there were a
okay.
truck moving things out.
Well, I'm
So
gonna give you a heads up.
yes.
I believe it's in the bedroom to the right, sorry, to the left as you walk in the door. There's
Okay. Yes.
there's an old bed
Mm-hmm.
that came from my house to the college because it belonged to Washington, William Howard Washington, who was the first president of Wells and a relative of mine.
Mm.
So and there's a dresser that matches it, and I'm just
There,
hoping
yes,
that
they
they're
were there.
still there.
They were there. I've also heard it called the President Frisbee bed. I think when it was given to the college, it was used in the president's house. Was it ever?
It was in my
Okay.
attic,
Okay.
in, right.
So did,
So,
so it was in your attic. So it was, yeah, okay. So it went in your time. So was that something that Paul Jones acquired?
no,
No. Okay.
no, and I said his name wrong. It was William Washington Howard.
Yes, W. Howard. Yep.
Right. So that is written on the bed,
Ah,
W.
okay.
Howard. And when I moved from Aurora to Texas, I gave the bed and the dresser to the college through, I won't say, through a woman who used to work there. And it was placed in Paul Jones.
Ah,
So
okay.
I don't know about President Frisbee or anything like that. It
No,
was,
apparently, yeah,
okay,
apparently not. Yeah, the W. Howard, that's a neat connection because there's that beautiful plaque to him in the Presbyterian Church. He was a
right,
very dear friend of E.B. Morgan's.
right.
He really didn't serve as president very long. I think it was
No,
toward the end of his life. He wasn't too
1 year,
right.
2 years, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it wasn't very long. And I think it's made out of black walnut that
Yes.
I was told came from the black walnut trees that were in the back of the house, but I don't know
Hmm.
that that's true.
It could well have been made locally.
I
Um,
just, I just know that when I found it in the attic, it was filthy and I had it all cleaned up and in cleaning it, discovered the pencil or the marker or whatever that said W. Howard. So I don't know how, I mean, that house had been in the family since 1835, so I'm
mhm.
assuming the bed had been there that long too. I don't know. But I'm glad to hear that as far as you know, it's still in the house. I hope it stays.
Yes. Okay, so E.B. Morgan made over the Presbyterian manse for his friend W. Howard, reversed the stairway, did a number of other things. And so it might have been the bed and bedroom set might have been moved across the street
Yeah,
afterwards.
exactly. After his
Yeah.
death, yes.
I have a kind of a funny little story about that. Some years ago, probably almost 10, um, I hosted a young couple who were in Aurora for their wedding. And uh, my part in this, in assisting in the service, but was to rent Paul Jones for them. And I hadn't quite remembered how very small everything was. So the groom, who's over 6 feet tall, just decided he would not go from the dining room into the kitchen at all, so that he wouldn't bump his head. And when I saw the master bedroom, I just looked at him and said, "I'm sorry." He said, "We'll manage."
Rand had a similar experience, one of the times that were in the house. He went to sleep before me, and the only way he fit in that bed was to be in diagonally. And I attempted to climb in there and I went, whoops, never mind, and went across
Not
to
happening.
the bedroom on the right.
Yes.
Linda, at least, excuse me, Lisa Hottie Young has her hand raised.
Oh, yes.
That was a while ago, and I'm guessing this is going to be part of October, how this became part of the Wells College holdings.
I will cover that. I will
Yes.
cover that.
That's what
Yes.
I'm guessing, but that's sort of been on my mind. I'm
Yeah.
also,
Paul's story is pretty interesting and pretty detailed, and we've been doing some dumpster diving.
I'll bet.
Rand's going to tell you a good bit about her family tree, and I'm documenting a lot of her work at the college. both volunteer and as staff. And so things will get clearer.
But Linda, I was also reflecting on, you're talking about moving the pieces of the house by log rolls as
Mhm.
opposed to sleds, you
Mhm.
know, pyramids. So it's, I've been learning a lot about various large scale movement, if you will, lately, because of upcoming travels and travels friends have done. So it's log rolls. Okay.
Yeah, that was the most common, was to, you'd put down a number of logs, it would roll over a certain distance, either by a winch or something to draw it. Everybody pictures like huge teams of horses. No, you had one horse or even a donkey and pulled it along. And then of course you had to run to the back and get the last few logs and put them down in front of the building and then move it another part of the distance.
Linda, I'm curious, how is it that the Zabriskie family was going to be the ones who made the decision about either move this house or tear it down? Was Robert Lansing Zabriskie in the contracting business that he was building Jean Davis's cottage?
Oh no, they made the decisions. But he I think is Gail on? This would be her grandfather we're speaking of. No,
I haven't seen
I
her
don't see
name,
Gail.
no.
Here.
Okay. Um, so this would be her grandfather, and he was for a time an interim treasurer, and I think he did a short interim presidency as well. So yes, he made
Yes.
decisions for the college.
Okay.
The property would have come, and again, I haven't done a deed search. I have a couple of deeds because of the proximity of my property. Um, so I don't know when it would have come to the college. If it was a tenant house, if it had continued as a tenant house, um, that was a reasonable way for it to happen when the holder of the property passed away. It was very common. If
Okay.
families didn't know what else to do with it, they gave it to Wells.
True enough. True enough.
Yes, so that's how many houses were acquired. So it was um, a financial decision, and that would have been a bit early in the era of this would have been just beginning to be um, yeah, Robert had his interim presidency later because Kerr Duncan Macmillan served from 1913 to 1935. So he was probably
Right.
treasurer at that point or on the board of
Yeah.
trustees. So they were
Okay.
making those decisions of making houses and properties available.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Robert Lansing's picture as the interim president in, I think, like the 1913 or 1912 yearbook.
Hmm.
Any other quick questions? If not, again, Linda, thank you. This is a house that has quite a history, and I think we all got a new appreciation for the little cottage that we walked by so many times in our lives at Wells. Like I said, I think I got a little homesick, and that's going to be reflected in this semester's offerings for Learning by the Lake. Rand and I will continue where Linda has stopped about Paul Jones and her relationship to the house next month. Then in November, I have asked my friend and the official biographer of Frances Folsom Cleveland, Annette Dunlap, who did her research at Wells and presented when her book came out in 2009. She has continued her research about Frank and other first ladies, and she'll be coming in November. And then in December, we're going to close out the bicentennial of the Erie Canal by one of the directors of education from the Canal Museum in Syracuse. Derek Pratt is going to speak to us about the Beery Canal, how the canal helped develop the brewing industry in central New York along its path. So we've got lots of history to delve into before Christmas, and then in January, and the rest we'll move on to other topics. But
There's a
thank
hand up.
yeah,
hand up.
Lisa.
Is my audio on? I have no idea.
Yes.
Yes.
Linda, one of the many things you've done tonight for all of us is not just illustrate history, reinforce all of our collective love for Aurora, but you've also made the case for liberal arts education. You're a chemistry teacher, but you're
Yes.
teaching us history. I mean, right there and then you have saying, guess what? You can learn all these different disciplines and be educated across the board.
Thank you. Yes.
Well said, Lisa. Okay, on
And
that note, I guess we should say good night for now, and we'll see you in October. Night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Stay well.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.